Section 39, Volume 3 of the Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christian Plasberg. The Book of 1,000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 39. When it was the 232nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Badur, the master of the horse and the owner of the house, came to the door of the saloon and found it open, he entered slowly and softly, and looking in, with head advanced and outstretched neck, saw Amjad and the girl sitting before the dish of fruit and the wine jar in front of them. Now Amjad at that moment had the cup in his hand, and his face turned to the door. And when his glance met Badur's eyes, his hue turned pale yellow, and his side muscles quivered. So seeing his trouble, Badur signed to him with his finger on his lips, as much as to say, Be silent, and come hither to me. Whereupon he set down the cup and rose, and the damsel cried, Whither away? He shook his head, and signing to her that he wished to make water, went out into the passage barefoot. Now when he saw Badur, he knew him for the master of the house. So he hastened to him, and kissing his hand, said to him, Allah upon thee, O Lord, ere thou do me a hurt, hear what I have to say. Then he told him who he was from first to last, and acquainted him with what caused him to quit his native land and royal state, and how he had not entered his house of his free will, but that it was the girl who had broken the lock-bolt and done all this. When Badur heard his story and knew that he was a king's son, he felt for him, and taking compassion on him said, Hearken to me, O Amjad, and do what I bid thee, and I will guarantee thy safety from that thou fearest. But if thou cross me, I will kill thee. Amjad replied, Command thee as thou wilt. I will not gainsay thee in aught. No, never, for I am the freedman of thy bounty. Rejoined Badur, Then go back forthwith into the saloon, sit down in thy place, and be at peace and shine ease. I will presently come in to thee, and when thou seest me, remember my name is Badur. Do thou revile me, and rail at me, saying, What made thee tarry till so late, and accept no excuse from me? Nay, so far from it, rise and beat me, and if thou spare me, I will do away thy life. Enter now and make merry, and whatsoever thou seekest of me at this time I will bring thee forthwith. And do thou spend this night as thou wilt, and on the morrow wend thy way. This I do in honor of the strangerhood, for I love the stranger and hold myself bounder to do him devoir. So Amjad kissed his hand, and returning to the saloon with his face clad in its natural white and red, at once said to the damsel, O my mistress, thy presence hath gladdened this shine own place, and ours is indeed a blessed night. Quoth the girl, Verily I see a wonderful change in thee, that thou now welcomest me so cordially. So Amjad answered, By Allah, O my lady, methought my servant Badur had robbed me of some necklaces of jewels worth 10,000 dinars each. However, when I went out but now in concern for this, I sought for them and found them in their place. I know not why the slave tarrieth so long, and needs must I punish him for it. She was satisfied with his answer, and they sported and drank and made merry, and ceased not to be so till near sundown, when Badur came in to them, having changed his clothes and girt his middle and put on shoes as are worn of Mamelukes. He saluted and kissed the ground, then held his hands behind him and stood, with his head hanging down, as one who confesseth to a fault. So Amjad looked at him with angry eyes and asked, Why hast thou tarried till now, O most pestilent of slaves? Answered Badur, O my lord, I was busy washing my clothes, and knew not of thy being there, for our appointed time was nightfall, and not daytide. But Amjad cried out at him, saying, Thou liest, O vilest of slaves! By Allah, I must needs beat thee. So he rose, and throwing Badur prone on the ground, took a stick and beat him gently. But the damsel sprang up, and snatching the stick from his hand, came down upon Badur so lustily that in extreme pain the tears ran from his eyes, and he ground his teeth together and called out for succour, whilst Amjad cried out to the girl, Don't! And she cried out, Let me satisfy my anger upon him, till at last he pulled the stick out of her hand and pushed her away. So Badur rose, and wiping away his tears from his cheeks, waited upon them the while, after which he swept the hall and lighted the lamps. But as often as he went in and out, the lady abused him and cursed him till Amjad was wroth with her and said, "For Almighty Allah's sake, leave my Mameluke. He is not used to this." Then they sat and ceased not eating and drinking, and Bahadur waiting upon them till midnight, when, being weary with service and beating, he fell asleep in the midst of the hall, and snored and snorted. Whereupon the damsel, who was drunk with wine, said to Amjad, "Arise, take the sword hanging yonder, and cut me off this slave's head. And if thou do it not, I will be the death of thee." "What possesseth thee to slay my slave?" asked Amjad. And she answered, "Our joyance will not be complete but by his death. If thou wilt not kill him, I will do it myself. By Allah's rights to thee, do not this thing." Quoth she, "It must perforce be," and taking down the sword, drew it and made it Bahadur to kill him. But Amjad said in his mind, "This man hath entreated us courteously, and sheltered us, and done us kindness, and made himself my slave. Shall we requite him by slaughtering him? This shall never be." Then he said to the woman, "If my Mameluke must be killed, better I should kill him than thou." So saying, he took the sword from her, and, raising his hand, smote her on the neck, and made her head fly from her body. It fell upon Bahadur, who awoke, and sat up and opened his eyes, when he saw Amjad standing by him, and in his hand the sword dyed with blood, and the damsel lying dead. He inquired what had passed, and Amjad told him all she had said, adding, "Nothing would satisfy her, but she must slay thee, and this is her reward." Then Bahadur arose, and kissing the prince's hand, said to him, "Would to heaven thou hadst spared her, but now there is nothing for it but to rid us of her without stay or delay, before the daybreak." Then he girded his loins, and took the body, wrapped it in an Abba cloak, and laying it in a large basket of palm leaves, he shouldered it, saying, "Thou art a stranger here, and knowest no one. So sit thou in this place, and await my return till daybreak. If I come back to thee, I will assuredly do thee great good service, and use my endeavors to have news of thy brother. But if by sunrise I return not, know that all is over with me, and peace be on thee, and the house and all it containeth of stuffs and money are shine." Then he fared forth from the saloon, bearing the basket, and threading the streets, he made for the salt sea, thinking to throw it therein. But as he drew near the shore, he turned and saw that the chief of police and his officers had ranged themselves around him, and on recognizing him, they wondered and opened the basket, wherein they found the slain woman. So they seized him and laid him in bilboes all that night till the morning, when they carried him and the basket, as it was, to the king, and reported the case. The king was sore enraged when he looked upon the slain, and said to Bahadur, "Woe to thee! Thou art always so doing. Thou killest folk, and castest them into the sea, and takest their goods. How many murders hast thou done ere this?" Thereupon Bahadur hung his head, and Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 233rd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Bahadur hung down his head groundwards before the king, who cried out at him, saying, 'Woe to thee! Who killed this girl?' He replied, 'O my lord, I killed her, and there is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great.' So the king in his anger commanded to hang him, and the hangman went down with him by the king's commandment, and the chief of police accompanied him with a crier, who called upon all the folk to witness the execution of Bahadur, the king's master of the horse. And on this wise they paraded him through the main streets and the market streets. This is how it fared with Bahadur. But as regards Amjad, he waited his host's return till the day broke and the sun rose. When he saw that he came not, he exclaimed, 'There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. Would I knew what this is become of him.' And, as he sat musing, behold, he heard the crier proclaiming Bahadur's sentence, and bidding the people to see the spectacle of his hanging at midday. Whereat he wept, and exclaimed, 'Verily we are Allah's, and to him we are returning. He meaneth to sacrifice himself unjustly for my sake, when I it was who slew her. By Allah, this shall never be.' Then he went from the saloon, and shutting the door after him, hurriedly threaded the streets till he overtook Bahadur, when he stood before the chief of police and said to him, 'O my lord, put not Bahadur to death, for he is innocent. By Allah, none killed her but I.' Now when the captain of police heard these words, he took them both, and carrying them before the king, acquainted him with what Amjad had said. Whereupon he looked at the prince and asked him, "Didst thou kill the damsel?" He answered, "Yes." And the king said, "Tell me why thou killedst her, and speak the truth." Replied Amjad, "O king, it is indeed a marvellous event and a wondrous matter that hath befallen me. Were it graven with needles on the eye corners, it would serve as a warner to whoso would be warned." Then he told him his whole story, and informed him of all that had befallen him and his brother, first and last. Whereat the king was much startled and surprised, and said to him, "Know that now I find thee to be excusable. But list, O youth, wilt thou be my wazir?" "Hearkening and obedience," answered Amjad. Whereupon the king bestowed magnificent dresses of honor on him and Badur, and gave him a handsome house, with eunuchs and officers and all things needful, appointing him stipends and allowances, and bidding him make search for his brother Asad. So Amjad sat down, invested and deposed, and took and gave. Moreover, he sent out a crier to cry his brother throughout the city, and for many days made proclamation in the main streets and market streets, but heard no news of Asad, nor happened on any trace of him. Such was his case. But as regards his brother, the Magi ceased not to torture Asad night and day, and eve and morn for a whole year's space, till their festival drew near, when the old man Bahram made ready for the voyage, and fitted out a ship for himself. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 234th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Bahram, the Magian, having fitted out a ship for the voyage, took Asad and put him in a chest which he locked, and had it transported on board. Now it so came to pass that, at the very time of shipping it, Amjad was standing to divert himself by looking upon the sea. And when he saw the men carrying the gear and shipping it, his heart throbbed, and he called to his pages to bring him his beast. Then, mounting with a company of his officers, he rode down to the seaside, and halted before the Magian ship, which he commanded his men to board and search. They did his bidding, and boarded the vessel, and rummaged in every part, but found nothing. So they returned and told Amjad, who mounted again and rode back. But he felt troubled in mind, and when he reached his place and entered his palace, he cast his eyes on the wall, and saw written thereon 2 lines, which were these couplets: "My friends, if ye are banished from mine eyes, from heart and mind ye ne'er go wandering. But ye have left me in my woe, and rob rest from my eyelids while ye are slumbering." And seeing them, Amjad thought of his brother and wept. Such was his case. But as for Bahram, the Magian, he embarked and shouted and bawled to his crew to make sail in all haste. So they shook out the sails and departed, and ceased not to fare on many days and nights. And every other day Bahram took out Asad, and gave him a bit of bread, and made him drink a sup of water, till they drew near the mountain of fire. Then there came out on them a storm wind, and the sea rose against them, so that the ship was driven out of her course till she shook a wrong line, and fell into strange waters. And at last they came in sight of a city builded upon the shore, with a castle whose windows overlooked the main. Now the ruler of this city was a queen called Marjana, and the captain said to Bahram, "O my lord, we have strayed from our course, and come to the island of Queen Marjana, who is a devout Moslama, and if she knew that we are Magians, she will take our ship and slay us to the last man. Yet needs must we put in here to rest and refit." Quoth Bahram, "Right is thy recking. Whatso thou seest fit that I will do." Said the shipmaster, "If the queen summon us and question us, how shall we answer her?" And Bahram replied, "Let us clothe this Moslem we have with us in a Mameluke's habit, and carry him ashore with us, so that when the queen sees him, she will suppose and say, 'This is a slave.' As for me, I will tell her that I am a slave dealer who buys and sells white slaves, and that I had with me many, but have sold all save this one, whom I retain to keep my accounts, for he can read and write." And the captain said, "This device should serve." Presently they reached the city, and slackened sail and cast the anchors, and the ship lay still, when behold, Queen Marjana came down to them, attended by her guards, and halting before the vessel, called out to the captain, who landed and kissed the ground before her. Quoth she, "What is the lading of this thy ship, and who hast thou with thee?" Quoth he, "O Queen of the age, I have with me a merchant who dealeth in slaves." And she said, "Hither with him to me." Whereupon Bahram came ashore to her, and with As'ad walking behind him in a slave's habit, and kissed the earth before her. She asked, "What is thy condition?" And he answered, "I am a dealer in chattels." Then she looked at As'ad, and taking him for a Mameluke, asked him, "What is thy name, O youth?" He answered, "Dost thou ask my present or my former name?" "Hast thou then two names?" inquired she, and he replied, and indeed his voice was choked with tears, "Yes, my name aforetime was Al-Asad, the most happy, but now it is Al-Mutar, Miseramus." Her heart inclined to him, and she said, "Canst thou write?" "Yes," answered he, and she gave him inkcase, and reed pen, and paper, and said to him, "Write somewhat that I may see it." So he wrote these 2 couplets. What can the slave do when pursued by fate? O justice judge, whatever be his state, whom God throws hand bound into the depths and says, "Beware, lest water should thy body wet." Now when she read these lines, she had wrath upon him, and said to Bahram, "Sell me this slave." He replied, "O my lady, I cannot sell him, for I have parted with all the rest, and none is left with me but he." Quoth the queen, "I must need have him of thee, either by sale or way of gift." But quoth Bahram, "I will neither sell him nor give him." Whereat she was wroth, and, taking As'ad by the hand, carried him up to the castle, and sent to Bahram, saying, "Except thou set sail and depart our city this very night, I will seize all thy goods and break up thy ship." Now when the message reached the Magian, he grieved with sore grief, and cried, "Verily, this voyage is on no wise to be commended." Then he arose, and made ready, and took all he needed, and awaited the coming of the night to resume his voyage, saying to the sailors, "Provide yourselves with your things, and fill your water-skins, that we may set sail at the last of the night." So the sailors did their business, and awaited the coming of darkness. Such was their case. But as regards Queen Marjanah, when she had brought As'ad into the castle, she opened the casements overlooking the sea, and bade her handmaids bring food. They set food before As'ad and herself, and both ate, after which the queen called for wine. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. End of section 39 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Recording by Christian Plasberg of Winchester, Virginia, and christianplasberg.com.
Section 40, Volume 3 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, translated by Richard Burton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. The Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3, Section 40. When it was the 235th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when Queen Marjanah bade her handmaids bring wine, and they set it before her, she fell to drinking with As'ad. Now Allah, be He extolled and exalted, filled her heart with love for the prince, and she kept filling his cup and handing it to him till his reason fled, and presently he rose and left the hall to satisfy a call of nature. As he passed out of the saloon, he saw an open door, through which he went and walked on till his walk brought him to a vast garden full of all manner of fruits and flowers, and sitting down under a tree, he did his occasion. Then he rose and went up to a jetting fountain in the garden, and made the lesser ablution, and washed his hands and face, after which he would have risen to go away. But the air smote him, and he fell back, with his clothes undone, and slept, and night overcame him thus. So far concerning him. But as concerns Bahram, the night being come, he cried out to his crew, saying, Set sail, and let us away. And they answered, We hear and obey, but wait till we fill our water-skins, and then we will set sail. So they landed with their water-skins, and went round about the castle, and found nothing but garden walls. Whereupon they climbed over into the garden, and followed the track of feet, which led them to the fountain, and there they found As'ad lying on his back. They knew him, and were glad to find him, and after filling their water-skins, they bore him off, and climbed the wall again with him, and carried him back in haste to Bahram, to whom they said, Hear the good tidings of thy winning thy wish, and gladden thy heart, and beat thy drums, and sound thy pipes, for thy prisoner, whom Queen Marjanah took from thee by force, we have found and brought back to thee. And they threw As'ad down before him. When Bahram saw him, his heart leapt for joy, and his breast swelled with gladness. Then he bestowed largesse on the sailors, and bade them set sail in haste. So they sailed forthright, intending to make the mountain of fire, and stayed not their course till the morning. This is how it fared with them. But as regards Queen Marjanah, she abode a while after As'ad went down from her, awaiting his return in vain, for he came not. Thereupon she rose and sought him, yet found no trace of him. Then she bade her women light flambeaux, and look for him, whilst she went forth in person, and seeing the garden door open, knew that he had gone thither. So she went out into the garden, and finding his sandals lying by the fountain, searched the place in every part, but came upon no sign of him. And yet she gave not over the search till morning. Then she inquired for the ship, and they told her, The vessel set sail in the first watch of the night. Wherefore she knew that they had taken As'ad with them, and this was grievous to her, and she was sore and angered. She bade equip 10 great ships forthwith, and making ready for fight, embarked in one of the 10 with her Mamelukes, and slave women, and men at arms, all splendidly accoutred and weaponed for war. They spread the sails, and she said to the captains, If you overtake the Magian's ship, ye shall have of me dresses of honour and largesse of money. But if you fail so to do, I will slay you to the last man. Whereat fear and great hope animated the crews, and they sailed all that day and the night, and the 2nd day, and the 3rd day, till, on the 4th, they sighted the ship of Bahram the Magian, and before evening fell, the Queen's squadron had surrounded it on all sides, just as Bahram had taken As'ad forth of the chest, and was beating and torturing him, whilst the prince cried out for help and deliverance, but found neither helper nor deliverer. And the grievous bastinado sorely tormented him. Now while so occupied, Bahram chanced to look up, and seeing himself encompassed by the Queen's ships, as the white of the eye encompasseth the black, he gave himself up for lost, and groaned, and said, Woe to thee, O As'ad! This is all out of thy head. Then taking him by the hand, he bade his men throw him overboard, and cried, By Allah, I will slay thee before I die myself. So they carried him along by the hands and feet, and cast him into the sea, and he sank. But Allah, be he extolled and exalted, willed that his life be saved, and that his doom be deferred. So he caused him to sink and rise again, and he struck out with his hands and feet, till the Almighty gave him relief, and sent him deliverance, and the waves bore him far from the Magian's ship, and threw him ashore. He landed, scarce crediting his escape, and once more on land he doffed his clothes, and wrung them, and spread them out to dry, whilst he sat naked and weeping over his condition, and bewailing his calamities and mortal dangers, and captivity and strangerhood. And presently he repeated these 2 couplets: Allah, my patience fails, I have no ward, my breast is straitened and clean cut my cord. To whom shall wretched slave of case complain, save to his Lord, O thou of lords the Lord? Then having ended his verse he rose and donned his clothes, but he knew not whither to go or whence to come. So he fed on the herbs of the earth and the fruits of the trees, and he drank of the streams, and fared on night and day till he came in sight of a city, whereupon he rejoiced and hastened his pace. But when he reached it, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 236th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that when he reached the city, the shades of evening closed around him, and the gates were shut. Now by the decrees of fate and man's lot, this was the very city wherein he had been a prisoner, and to whose king his brother Amjad was minister. When As'ad saw the gate was locked, he turned back and made for the burial ground, where finding a tomb without a door, he entered therein and lay down and fell asleep, with his face covered by his long sleeve. Meanwhile, Queen Marjanah, coming up with Bahrom's ship, questioned him of As'ad. Now the Magian, when Queen Marjanah overtook him with her ships, baffled her by his artifice and gramarye, swearing to her that he was not with him, and that he knew nothing of him. She searched the ship, but found no trace of her friend. So she took Bahram, and carrying him back to her castle, would have him put to death. But he ransomed himself from her with all his good and his ship, and she released him and his men. They went forth from her hardly believing in their deliverance, and fared on 10 days' journey, till they came to their own city, and found the gate shut, it being eventide. So they made for the burial ground, thinking to lie the night there, and going round about the tombs, as fate and fortune would have it, saw the building wherein As'ad lay wide open, whereat Bahram marvelled and said, I must look into this sepulchre. Then he entered and found As'ad lying in a corner fast asleep, with his head covered by his sleeve. So he raised his head, and looking in his face, knew him for the man on whose account he had lost his good and his ship, and cried, What, art thou yet alive? Then he bound him, and gagged him without further parley, and carried him to his house, where he clapped heavy shackles on his feet, and lowered him into the underground dungeon aforesaid prepared for the tormenting of Muslims, and he bade his daughter by name Bustan torture him night and day, till the next year, when they would again visit the mountain of fire, and there offer him up as a sacrifice. Then he beat him grievously, and locking the dungeon door upon him, gave the keys to his daughter. By and by, Bustan opened the door, and went down to beat him, but finding him a comely youth, and a sweet face, with arched brows and eyes black with nature's kohl, she fell in love with him, and asked him, What is thy name? My name is As'ad, answered he, whereat she cried, Mayst thou indeed be happy as thy name, and happy be thy days. Thou deservest not torture and blows, and I see thou hast been injuriously entreated. And she comforted him with kind words, and loosed his bonds. Then she questioned him of the religion of Al-Islam, and he told her that it was the true and right faith, and that our Lord Muhammad had approved himself by surpassing miracles and signs manifest, and that fire worship is harmful and not profitable. And he went on to expound to her the tenets of Al-Islam, till she was persuaded, and the love of the true faith entered her heart. Then, as Almighty Allah had mixed up with her being a fond affection for As'ad, she pronounced the 2 testimonies of the faith, and became of the people of felicity. After this she bought him meat and drink, and talked with him, and they prayed together. Moreover, she made him chicken stews, and fed him therewith, till he regained strength, and his sickness left him, and he was restored to his former health. Such things befell him with the daughter of Bahram the Magian. And so it happened that one day she left him, and stood at the house door, when behold, she heard the crier crying aloud, and saying, Whoso hath with him a handsome young man, whose favour is thus and thus, and bringeth him forth, shall have all he seeketh of money. But if any have him and deny it, he shall be hanged over his own door, and his property shall be plundered, and his blood go for naught. Now As'ad had acquainted Bustan bint Bahram with his whole history. So when she heard the crier, she knew it was he who was sought for, and, going down to him, told him the news. Then he fared forth and made for the mansion of the Wazir, whom, when As'ad saw, exclaimed, By Allah, this minister is my brother Amjad. Then he went up, and the damsel walking behind him, to the palace, where he again saw his brother, and threw himself upon him, whereupon Amjad also knew him, and fell upon his neck, and they embraced each other, whilst the Wazir's Mamelukes dismounted, and stood round them. They lay a while insensible, and when they came to themselves, Amjad took his brother, and carried him to the Sultan, to whom he related the whole story, and the Sultan charged him to plunder Bahram's house. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 237th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that the Sultan ordered Amjad to plunder Bahram's house, and to hang its owner. So Amjad dispatched thither for that purpose a company of men, who sacked the house, and took Bahram, and brought his daughter to the Wazir, by whom she was received with all honour. For As'ad had told his brother the torments he had suffered, and the kindness she had done him. Thereupon Amjad related in his turn to As'ad all that had passed between himself and the damsel, and how he had escaped hanging and had become Wazir, and they made moan each to other of the anguish they had suffered for separation. Then the Sultan summoned Bahram, and bade strike off his head, but he said, O most mighty King, art thou indeed resolved to put me to death? Replied the King, Yes, except thou save thyself by becoming a Muslim. Quoth Bahram, O King, bear with me a little while. Then he bowed his head groundwards, and presently raising it again, made profession of the faith, and Islamized at the hands of the Sultan. They all rejoiced at his conversion, and Amjad and As'ad told him all that had befallen them, whereat he wondered and said, O my lords, make ready for the journey, and I will depart with you, and carry you back to your father's court in a ship. At this they rejoiced, and wept with sore weeping, but he said, O my lords, weep not for your departure, for it shall reunite you with those you love, even as were Ni'mah and Naomi. And what befell Ni'mah and Naomi? Asked they. They tell, replied Bahram, but Allah alone is all-knowing, the following tale. End of Volume 3. End of Section 40 of the Book of 1000 Nights and a Night, Volume 3. Recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. Recorded in London, England.